So let's talk about the four different types of federal law we have in this country. And some of you are probably thinking, four? I thought there was only one. Well, there are four types of federal law in this country. The first type is an executive order. Now, executive orders are usually meant to direct agencies to do something within their already congressionally approved powers, to either do something slightly different than what they normally do, or to review something, or change how something works, etc. And a good example of this would be when President Joe Biden directed the Department of Education to go through with an executive order to review student loans. They went through and they looked at people who have been paying their loans on time for the 25 years, which by law already was a thing that said if you paid it for that many years and you were, never late, etc., you got the rest of your loan forgiven. That was already an existing law. He just said, hey, go through, double check your books, and we're going to forgive the loans for the rest of the people who need them forgiven because of the way this law works. But executive orders are short term typically. One of the things about an executive order is they end effectively the day the next administration takes over, because that next administration can write an executive order saying, I direct this agency to stop doing whatever the previous president said. So executive orders are temporary and usually meant to work within existing congressionally approved laws, directing people to do things one way or another. Another example of kind of a controversial executive order, because they can be controversial, Franklin Delano Roosevelt used executive orders to do the internment camps during World War II, where they rounded up Japanese Americans because they were afraid of another attack like Pearl Harbor. And again, they end up being, the minute FDR died, Truman could have stopped that at that moment, because again, they end effectively when the new president takes over. They can change it. Now, Congress can also go over and review an executive order, and they can pass a law or change a law by passing something to either prevent the executive order from working the way the president signed it, or maybe just making it so it works that way from now on, whichever way they want to do it. So Congress can kind of review executive orders. Okay, well, what's the second type of law then? The second type of laws are regular laws. They're what you think of when, Congress passes a law, the president signs it, it becomes a law. And those apply federally with the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution says the federal government, their laws trump all other state laws. So if a president comes in tomorrow and says, and they write a law that says, and the president signs it, that says speed limits are no longer allowable within the borders of the United States, all speed limits would go away. Just an example with the Supremacy Clause, but that's how they pass a law. Now, a president can veto a bill if Congress passes something and the president vetoes it. Congress can go back and approve it around the veto anyway. So there is some workarounds there. A lot of bills also can do with funding. It's not always this is allowed, this isn't. There's a lot of bills and a lot of laws that involve money. And because they have to pass something through Congress, the president has to sign it in order to spend money. They can't just spend money, at will. Okay, what's the third type of law is a Supreme Court decision. Now, a Supreme Court decision is like law because it is treated like a law. For example, a lot of you know, thanks to movies and TV and stuff, you've all heard of your Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. You have a right to an attorney. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you? We all know it because it has gotten ingrained into us with the media and through television and movies and stuff. But it started with a Supreme Court case, with a case and a gentleman named with the last name of Miranda, who sued because he didn't understand his rights when he was being interrogated by police. And in that case, the Supreme Court ruled that it is reasonable for the police to remind people in that situation, because of the chaos of being under criminal investigation and the nervousness and just everything going on, that you have the right to be reminded of your other rights. So that's why they now read you your Miranda rights. Supreme Court decisions can also reverse each other. At one point the Supreme Court said separate but equal was okay. That's how we ended up with segregation. This idea that things being separate, as long as they were equal, is allowable under the Constitution. Well, later on, a different Supreme Court said no, that is not okay. So Supreme Court decisions cannot overrule themselves. Another more recent example might be Roe versus Wade. In the 70s, the Supreme Court decided that abortion was a medical decision. You had the right to make a private medical decision, and the government could not stop you from it. And now with the Dobbs decision, they have said, no, you do not have a right to an abortion. States can limit that. So Supreme Court decisions can overrule each other, and you have to go with the most recent decision. Now, what Congress can do, Congress can pass laws changing a Supreme Court decision. For example, if there's a decision by the Supreme Court that says, well, the law as written doesn't cover this scenario, Congress can pass a law that covers that scenario, and now they can fix it. Things like that. Or they can just say, like in the Dobbs decision, where they said you do not have a right to an abortion under federal law, they can pass a federal law that says, yes, you do. And Supreme Court decisions also work with tossing out laws. A law could be duly passed by Congress, signed by the president, and the court can come in and say, yeah, that law doesn't fit within the framework of the Constitution. It is unconstitutional. It has to go. So those are just some examples there of those three types of laws. Now there is a fourth type of a law, and that is a constitutional amendment. I mean, the Constitution, the basic Constitution, only talks about how to frame the government, and it is the skeleton of our government system. And there's some laws in that as far as how things work, like having 2 senators per state, things like that. But then the Constitution has been amended 27 times so far to add things to it. For example, the First Amendment granting the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, the freedom of the press, the freedom to assemble. Those things have been added, and they are law, and now no other law can be passed changing that. The only other thing they could do would be to pass another amendment to repeal a previous amendment, and that has been done just once in our history, and that was during Prohibition. They passed a constitutional amendment outlawing alcohol in this country, and about 3 years later they passed a repeal of that because they realized it was a bad idea. So those are the 4 types of laws in this country. Hope that kind of clears up some confusion about what is and isn't a law, and how just passing something by like an executive order doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to be that way forever, because things can change. The only ones that really are more permanent are amendments. But again, those are very hard to pass, as I talked about in a previous video. So I just hope that helps clear up any confusion there about the different types of laws in this country.